Good morning, everyone. Eric Perez from Talking Leadership. Thanking you for joining me again on the podcast. Today, I have the pleasure of being joined by Jodie Redcliffe. How are you going, Jodie?
Good, thanks, Eric. How are you?
Look, appreciate your time. So can I ask you to introduce yourself to the podcast listeners in your current role or other roles that you hold at the moment?
Sure. I'm Jodie Redcliffe. I'm a 2013 Nuffield Scholar and currently working as Interim CEO for Nuffield Australia.
Excellent. Okay, so I might start off with the question I've always started off with is, in which industry was your first leadership role?
In the chicken industry. So my husband and I were broiler chicken farmers, so that's a contract growing position, as all broiler farming is in most countries in the world. So we did that for about 37 years, and I took on a leadership role. We finished that about a couple of years ago, so 8 years or so prior to that, I took on my first leadership roles in the chicken industry, in the broiler industry, by becoming a delegate, and then was president of the Queensland Growers Association and president of the Australian Chicken Growers Council. And then sort of, through that held another few positions on different industry bodies, and did my Nuffield scholarship, and then got involved in leadership positions in the Nuffield organisation.
Wow, so you've had a fairly extensive trip there. So can I ask what motivated you to take on the roles in the chicken industry and then in Nuffield?
Yeah. I guess in the two different areas, there was probably different motivations, because in the chicken industry, it really just started because I was interested to know more about what was going on in our industry. And I thought, we're all in business to make money, and the best way to understand making money in my business and how my business worked was to understand how the industry more generally worked. So that was the first motivation. And I guess back then and certainly now, when I look back at why, it's to do also with wanting to help people, just get involved and, bring people along on the journey. And if you look at when your kids are at school, you get involved with the P&C, and we always did that, and there was always some sort of committee that you're involved in, and that's because you want to be helpful, you want to make a difference, and make your experience in whatever it is the best it can be.
Okay, great. So in your experiences then, could you tell me what's the difference in your mind, if any, between leadership and management?
Well, now that I'm doing this job as interim CEO, there's definitely a few differences. I think management's much more about dotting the I's and crossing the T's, setting up work programs, making sure other people know what needs to be done and what's expected of them, keeping track of what's coming up in the future. Leadership, I think, is much more getting up on the balcony and being able to see the big picture, which makes it a much more difficult skill, I think. Having said that, some people are very suited to management and very suited to having a list and ticking things off a list, but not necessarily as good at seeing the forest for the trees. But I think it's a skill that can be learnt, definitely. It's just a matter of understanding what needs prioritising.
Great. So let me put this to you. Leaders make mistakes. So in your leadership journey, how do you own or how do you address mistakes in your leadership style?
Yeah. I think fundamentally you just have to remember that you're human the same as everybody else, and just because you're in a leadership position doesn't mean you're any different from anyone else. And I think, looking at the way my leadership roles grew very organically, it was just a matter of, okay, well, I'll do this, and okay, well, someone asks you to do this, and so you realise that you're no different to anybody else, except possibly you've been asked or given an opportunity that somebody hasn't. So therefore you should be forgiving of yourself if you make mistakes, and also have a thick skin, and I guess you probably need to have some fairly healthy self-esteem, which is, probably good advice for life in general, because you have to believe that at the end of the day that you're doing the best job that you can with the information and the resources that you have available at the time that you're making a decision or taking an action. And you have to trust that you've done the best of your ability with that information. And then, if something does go pear-shaped, accept it, learn from it, and move on to the next thing.
Sure. Okay. So in your travels, what have you found is the most difficult aspect of leadership or being a leader?
Well, in my case, it's probably that I like to be quite collaborative, and I like to hear what everybody thinks, and I like to get to a decision based on cooperation and collaboration. But at the end of the day, people are looking to you, if you're in a leadership role, for guidance, which means at the end of the day, you've got to be the one that says, okay, heard all that, we're going to do this. So taking that responsibility can be a fairly hefty weight. But in my case, I find if I can listen to people and accept advice and accept opinions, it just makes the decisions easier, because you feel like you've done the best you can to bring everybody along on the journey.
Yeah, sure. Okay, that's great. So something a bit away from the difficulties of leadership. How do you measure success?
I think we go back to the difference between management and leadership. In management, you'll have, KPIs, you'll have boxes that you're ticking and things that you're achieving, and you'll have percentages of this, that, and the other. And you can use some of those concrete things. But I think leadership is more about culture and values and vision and mission. So more of the things that are more difficult to tie down, but are incredibly important in any organisation, because they are what underpins everything that you do. So you really need to go back all the way to looking at what it is that you do, why your company or your organisation does what it does, when you're looking at measuring the success of the leadership, because you won't make any achievements in your business or in your organisation without understanding and valuing and promoting the culture of that organisation.
Okay, excellent. So I just want to get your thoughts on a couple of statements here, Jodie, if I can. The first one is, on-the-job experience develops better leaders.
Yep. Well, I can definitely attest to that. So the organisation that I'm currently interim CEO for is Nuffield Australia. So we're a not-for-profit organisation that provides scholarships for primary producers in Australia, and we have affiliate organisations all around the world. Our umbrella organisation is Nuffield International. So we are, being non-profit, relying very heavily on our alumni. So these are farmers that have been awarded scholarships over the years, of which I'm one, to take leadership roles in our organisation in a voluntary capacity. So it really is a matter of, suggesting to people that, gee, you could do this, why don't you do this for us, and hoping that people will. So it's not even a matter of, hiring people and paying them to do the work. We're actually asking people to do it for the values and the culture of our organisation. So that's often a big ask. And in my current position, I was asked to step into this role while our current CEO, Jodie, is on maternity leave, not having run this type of organisation before and worked in this particular capacity. So really, I think, as I said earlier, anyone in a leadership position is no different. It's just a matter of different opportunities and different experiences along the way. And the only way to learn something is to just muck in and start.
Yeah, fair enough. So the next statement, and I think it's related to what you were saying before, formal education helps to develop better leaders. Because
Yeah.
and I asked this, and I guess the context and why I'm extremely happy that I've got this chance to speak to you is that the Nuffield program offers an ability to go out and do some stuff in an area of interest to those in the ag sector. So that link, whilst it might not be technically formal education, is a form of education as part of your leadership journey. So what are your views around that, Jodie?
Yeah, that's exactly right. Our overriding mission is to make a difference in agriculture and to be developing thought leadership and leadership more generally in the ag sector. So we're taking farmers, and it's a long game that we're playing. So we want these farmers to through their scholarship, network and have learning journeys that they wouldn't have ordinarily had. Sometimes those farmers and ag professionals do have formal qualifications, and in this day and age, it's I would say the majority of farmers do, but it's not necessary. So we do get all types, and it's very interesting. Just because you don't have a formal qualification means nothing at all in your ability to be a good leader. Having said all that, I think formal qualifications of some sort do help you with your underpinnings, and they do help with things like, as I said earlier, that you need a high self-esteem to be able to take a leadership role. So having completed some sort of formal qualification does help with that, and it just gives you more idea of, for example, how business works in general, how meetings are run in general, how to write a report in general. So all those things are really good learnings that you can take from formal education. And when I look at my own kids, no way in the world would I have said to them, don't go and get a formal education qualification of some description. And it doesn't really matter what it is. And I've done a little bit in terms of leadership formal learning. And I think in any situation, you've just got to go into it, okay, what can I learn out of this? And it can be quite surprising. Often your take home will not be what you thought you were going to get out of a situation, and the same in formal learning. My original degree, my undergrad degree, is in psychology, and I didn't ever practice as a psych, but I think in general over the years it's been fantastic foundation for a lot of the things that I've done.
That's excellent to hear. I'm in good company because my undergrad was also in psychology, behavioural science, and a business degree. While I was young, I thought I'd get a couple of these things out of the way, but so from an experience.
That's exactly right. I think that's really good advice, to get some things like that under your belt while you're young, because then life gets busy and life gets in the way. So do a lot of that if you're young.
Yes, that's good advice for those that are early career leaders. If you've got a chance to get more qualifications that are related to what you're doing and you have an interest, then go for it. Something interesting that's come up in this chat, and I've heard this from other people in the ag sector in general in my travels, is do you think that there's a natural curiosity amongst the farming community and farmers in particular that taking on leadership roles and doing extra study to get yourself more skilled up is just a part of the makeup of a typical person in the ag sector these days?
Yeah, that's a good observation. I'd like to think so. Some of that is because we find in farming you've just got to wear so many hats. You've got to be skilled in so many areas. It's not just for example, being very visually observant. You've got to be out in the field looking at either your pastures or your cattle, for example. You've got to have really good business skills. You've got to be able to work with staff and communicate well verbally. Then you've got to be able to read, say, for example, an academic research report that might be on whatever it is, integrated pest management, or it might be, some sort of veterinary report on bacteria. So you've got to run a full gamut of skills, and because of that, I think a lot of people in farming are very hungry for information in a lot of areas, and kind of are able to find something within their own skill set that will suit them in their farming journey.
Excellent. No, I appreciate that. So here's the next statement, and this one I've had lots of varying responses to, and it can be nuanced. So there's no right or wrong answer here. Leaders are born, not made. What's your perspective on that?
I think there are a lot of skills that can be learnt and skills that can be taught. I also think modelling behaviour is really, really important, so that you will absorb a lot of the ways in which you should conduct yourself and how you might be an example to others through behaviour that's been modelled to you rather than things that are taught to you or, lectured to you. So a lot of the skills that you have, you should be absorbing almost organically rather than, learning as such. So there's different ways of learning things. Having said all that, whether or not you have a natural gift for leadership is different. So, I do think there's a role there for that. And when I look at people that are particularly good leaders, if you look at even just in general, great world leaders, if you went and Googled that, you might come up with somebody like Winston Churchill or Dalai Lama, for example. So if you go all the way to the top and look at people like that, they have a remarkable presence and ability to be statesmen. So they have an ability to craft words really well, and using those words inspire people. And by great presence, I mean they do have the ability to model good behaviour. So they are skills that really good leaders, I think, have a natural ability in.
Excellent. Okay, so this next question is for forms part of what I'm doing as a research project, and I claim no expertise in the research field as yet because I'm only an early career researcher. But as part of my studies, I'm sort of asking that question around what are the core leader capabilities into the future. And from my perspective, the literature seems to be screaming back at me that it's strategic thinking and foresight are going to be the two most critical leader capabilities going forward into the future. And you could apply that to any sector. Agriculture is just one of them. What are your views on that?
Yeah, I think you're probably right. I think, as I said earlier, that ability to see the big picture, because with foresight, it's often, in many sectors, but particularly in ag, it's often not easy to predict what's coming. So it's not enough to, say, look at research on, whatever industry you are and then kind of try and predict where it's going. You've got to be able to look really, really broadly at a lot of different trends and then take those and, be the Nostradamus looking in the crystal ball to see what might be coming. And it is the job of the people in leadership to be doing that rather than people that are getting busy, I guess, on their day-to-day journeys. So, I would agree, Eric. Okay,
and final question, Jodie. What might you say to a younger version of yourself about being an effective leader?
Well, I'd probably say to my younger self, you won't know where you won't know where you end up, because I don't think I actually ever thought that I'd be in the positions I've done over the years. So I think it's a matter of always being open to new experiences and the opinions of others, and distilling whatever it is that you learn into your own voice. So I think you've got to be clear as a younger person, as my younger self, you've got to start to develop some clarity about what you believe and what's important to you. So you need as your base your morals and your values, and your acceptance of your boundaries of right and wrong. So you need to sort of sort all that out. And then as you go along in life, just decide to take as much as you can on board and then distill it through your base or your grounding, because you should never be closed to new opportunities. So you've got to be constantly learning. Life's a long game. So you've got to be constantly learning and not put too much set in stone.
Thank you for mentioning that, because that's come up a few times as well in some of the other discussions that I've had, that the leadership thing is about embracing lifelong learning, and what that means to one person may be different to another. So now, look, Jodie, I appreciate your time. I'd like to thank you for joining me on this podcast.
Sure.
Look, and so for those listening, I was just having a discussion with Jodie Redcliffe, the Interim CEO of Nuffield. Look, appreciate your time, and for those listening, I will catch you on the next podcast. Thanks, Jodie.
Thanks, Eric.
Cheers.